we're going to take a deep dive into the rest of Resolve Studio. So please welcome all the way from Philadelphia, Jason Druss.
Thank you very much. And thanks to you guys for spending your evening with us, especially after work, coming here, hanging out. We really appreciate your time. We're going to be going over what's new in DaVinci Resolve on the edit page, the color page, new information about Fusion, and overall general workflow enhancements that everyone is going to be able to take advantage of. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the little things that make some pretty big differences in Resolve 16. On the edit page, we now have tape-style audio scrubbing. So if we play back some of this media, and we go ahead and use our playhead and just start scrubbing, you're going to notice a lot smoother playback and a lot smoother scrubbing compared to what we had in previous years. This is especially relevant when you're using the new editor keyboard and when you're scrubbing audio on the Fairlight page as well. But tape-style audio scrubbing is a really interesting thing about Resolve 16. Let's also take a look at our audio tracks down here. One thing that the editors might notice is that we now have the option of full waveform or half rectified waveform. So if you're used to viewing them in a half level right here, that's normally how you'd view them on the edit page. We now have the ability to view them the same way we view them on the Fairlight page, with fully rectified audio waveforms. In addition to that, we have some really great new tools. Well, I shouldn't say new. We had this last year. But how many of you guys out there used Superscale last year, by show of hands? A couple of folks. Jason's a big fan of the Superscale. Yeah. There's a lot of folks that have actually, we've heard from customers at trade shows that they've been actually ditching upscaling hardware and just using the Superscale feature in Resolve 15. If you go to clip attributes on any clip or a number of clips, you can go at the bottom, you can see Superscale here. Using the new DaVinci Resolve Neural Engine, which we'll talk about more in a bit, we can upscale 2, 3, and 4 times, which means you can get media up to 8K converted from whatever resolution you like. And it does a really good job. In version 16, we see way less noise in the shadows, much better, clearer, sharper pictures when you're upscaling your media. Additionally, collaboration got a lot of improvements in version 16. How many of you folks out there have used the collaborative workflow since version 14, since we switched over to our new system? Well, not only can editors and colorists and audio mixers and everyone work on the same project at the same time doing different jobs, but now individual users in version 16 can have their own independent cache files. So if you're a colorist and you're an editor, again, or a sound mixer using Fairlight, you have very different requirements based on what you need from the media you're using, especially if everything's raw on the same timeline, right? You know, editing versus color grading, different requirements. So each individual user can have their own cache. And also monitoring settings, because again, if you have an editor and a colorist, both jobs are going to view information and view the project in completely different ways. So now each user can have those own customized settings. Additionally, if you work at a large facility where you're currently logging in and out of a lot of computers, in version 16, all of your system preferences and all of your settings will carry with you based on the user of the computer. So you can log in and log out of a computer at your workspace and have all of your settings follow you, because now all the settings in Resolve 16 follow the user of the computer. Additionally, let's take a look at some other cool stuff. Let's talk about the DaVinci Resolve Neural Engine. And before we go ahead and talk about it, I'm going to take these clips right here. We have this bin called Scene 82. And inside of this bin, I have a lot of faces in the scene. And what I'm going to do is detect where those faces are. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight all the clips in these bins. We're going to right-click, and then I'm going to go ahead and analyze clips for people. Now, while that's cooking, I'll tell you about the Neural Engine. The DaVinci Resolve Neural Engine is essentially a new series of artificial intelligence and deep learning neural networks that allow us to do lots of cool stuff that we've never been able to do before. However, what we're doing with these neural learning networks is that we're mixing them and combining them with existing tools that we've had in DaVinci Resolve for a long time based on our YRGB color science and our float processing to have some really cool new effects. Now, once this finishes cooking, what we're going to be able to do is assign names to all of these characters. And also, the neural engine in general just makes Resolve run a lot faster. And we're going to see that also later on when we make an export. So now that we have these 3 faces up, I can see we have 3 unnamed characters. And what I can do is I can go ahead and name them now. So name them. We've got Jim, and we've got Dwight, and we'll go ahead and name this person Michael. So we've got Jim and Dwight and Michael. And you'll also notice that I have some other people too that don't have a name associated with them. So I can always right-click on them and I can tag them and say this is actually Jim or Dwight or Michael, or this is a new person. I can say this is a 4th character in our scene that the tool didn't pick up on, and this is actually Andy. So now we have our 4 main characters. I hit close, and Resolve automatically made smart bins based on people that have been automatically populated for me. So now I can see all my clips with all of my characters. So for long-form editors, documentary editors, television editors, it's a lot easier to make smart bins based on characters by analyzing faces. Something else that I'm really excited about, we're going to jump between a big tool and a little tool, but a really important one. How many of you guys are editors here? Awesome. And how many of you editors here stabilize footage as part of your job? Well, we're happy to say that now you can do that on the edit page without having to go to the color page. We have full access to all stabilization, including perspective mode and including camera lock. So you can access stabilization now from the edit page. We're pretty psyched about that. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about my absolute favorite tool in Resolve 16. Now, how many colorists and finishing artists do we have here in the show? Cool, a lot of hands. Now, how many of you guys have 8 versions of all of your projects because you need different timeline resolutions and frame rates and deliverables, so you end up making a lot of projects? I'm happy to say that in DaVinci Resolve 16, we have multiple timeline resolutions and frame rates in the same project. We did it. Cool. So let's go take a look at how it works, right? I'm going to go ahead into this bin, and I'm going to make a new timeline. Let's right-click and create a new timeline. We're going to call this timeline NTSC. What we're going to do then, we're going to use this new button called Use Custom Settings. When I click on Use Custom Settings, we now have this new Format tab. So I'm going to choose the timeline resolution of this timeline to be 720 by 480, and we're going to go ahead and make that 4 by 3, and then for the frame rate, we're going to go ahead and make it 5994, right? Because as we all know, standard definition is alive and well. Notice also in this new timeline that we also have custom monitoring settings, because again, if you're going to mess with the timeline resolutions, that's going to affect how your Ultra Studio or your Deck Link is treating your footage and outputting it to your monitors. So you have those custom options for you as well. So let's go ahead and create this, and we have our new timeline called NTSC. Now, I'm going to use some of the existing tools in Resolve by making a timeline stack, and I'm going to open up a different version of this timeline. Now let's go ahead and shrink the video and audio track heights right there. Now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and highlight everything in this timeline, and I'm just going to copy and paste by dragging up into the NTSC timeline. And now you can see that not only do we have this, but our whole canvas size has changed to a native 4 by 3 aspect ratio, and we're going to go ahead and play it back and check that out.
My name is
5994 playing back. And then if I hop back over to the 2.39 aspect ratio we have down below, the 2K project, we're back to 2K, playing back 2398, back and forth. Yeah. So what that means, similar to what we were showing you guys on the with Mary with the cut page earlier with the vertical resolution videos, when you do need to make your vertical deliverables and your work is on the edit page versus the cut page, you can now just copy and paste, duplicate your timeline, and go ahead and make that vertical version without having to make a whole new project. So the next thing we're going to talk about, expanding on something Mary was speaking about earlier, she showed you that quick export tool on the cut page, which is a really great way to avoid the deliver page if you don't want to go there. Well, we're also happy to say that that quick export tool is available on every page in the software. You can go to File, Quick Export from the color page, from the edit page, and you can make those fast exports that give you the most common settings that you'll find on the deliver page right here from the edit page, for example. And since we can now upload to YouTube and Vimeo using internet accounts, we're going to go ahead and open that up. Now, you'll notice also, Mary mentioned this, that we have integration with Frame.io this year, but it's complete integration. And we have some really great tools here. How many of you folks in the audience are Frame.io users right now? Cool. And I'm going to assume that most or all of you know about Frame.io. It's a really wonderful review and approval collaboration tool for teams. Now, we're going to go ahead and sign into Frame.io. So let's go ahead and use my email address. And hopefully, I type it correctly. There we go. Let's do the password.
Yeah, that's the same password as I have.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Yeah. So now I'm logged into Frame.io in DaVinci Resolve. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now, not only can we export to Frame.io from DaVinci Resolve, before we look at any more tools, let's get rid of that NTSC timeline. Let's go ahead over to this timeline over here. Great, there we go. Now, let's take a look and go over to the media page. One thing you'll notice up here is that in addition to all the hard drives attached to my computer, I actually have access to my Frame.io account and all of the media inside of my Frame.io account. So if I want to go into my projects, let's do the Silent Natural, and then let's go ahead and go to Clips. I have all of these clips right here, and what Frame.io is doing right now is actually loading an automatically accessible proxy file, and I can go ahead and take all these clips and drag and drop them into my bin. Now, the proxy clips are available immediately, and if I go to Workspace and show the background activity monitor, you can see that all of these clips are now currently downloading from the web. So for now, I can set my in and out points and actually edit with these clips from the Frame.io servers available as proxies, and then as they download, I'll just be able to use them at the source level, being the original source media that it's supposed to be from what we're downloading from the Frame.io website. So let's go ahead and check out exporting and uploading to Frame.io. We have this timeline right here. I'm ready for my first draft of approval, and I'm going to go over to the Deliver page and show you guys the actual Frame.io settings here. So I'm going to go to Frame.io. Let's call this file name. Let's do LACPUG. And where am I going to upload it to? Let's go to my Frame.io folders, and I want to go ahead and put it in my Silent Natural project, and I want to put it in my drafts folder. So I'm going to go ahead and save it there. For the resolution, let's do 720p, and for the codec, let's keep it H.264. Nice, easy, clean, and simple. Let's go ahead and add this to the render queue, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit Start Render. As you can see also, because of the Resolve Neural Engine, we're rendering very, very fast right now, somewhere between 250 frames per second and 150 frames per second based on where we are on the timeline. And just like that, before I can even finish spieling about it, it's uploading very rapidly to Frame.io. Did you notice it slowed down a little bit just as I said it's uploading very rapidly to Frame.io? There we go. So the upload is complete. So now let's continue and let's go ahead and open up Safari. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new tab, and we're going to go to Accounts at Frame.io, and let's go ahead and log in. All right, and here we are inside of Frame. So again, let's go ahead and go to our Silent Natural project, and I'm going to open my drafts folder. And here's the export that we just made a couple seconds ago. Now it's currently preparing for playback, so let's go ahead and double click on it and let's see if it's ready for playback yet. And we're just going to wait for that to cook for a few more seconds. There we go. Let's just refresh it for safety. There we go. So right now,
I'm afraid the feed.
Let's turn this down at the Mac level. There we go. So now our quote-unquote producer is viewing the project that we've exported for them. Let's zip ahead to somewhere else further down in the timeline.
Hey, quick.
And let's play.
Strike three, you're out.
So we have this pretty cool shot of the baseball player swinging his bat, and we have that nice cinematic slow-motion choppiness going on. But what if the producer wants to view that slow-motion shot in a different way? And what if they tell us, can you make this shot look like it was really shot in slow motion? And just for good measure, let's go ahead and draw an annotation around the baseball player to make sure they know who we're talking about, just in case. let's go ahead and send that comment out, right? So while we wait for that comment, let's go ahead and hop back into the edit page in DaVinci Resolve, and let's go ahead and take a look at the comment that our producer was talking about. So actually, it's cool because based on the internet speed of the connection, sometimes it takes a couple seconds, sometimes it's instantaneous. But before we could even go ahead and zoom in on the clip, we have this new yellow marker that just appeared out of nowhere. And if I go to that marker, we can see the marker overlay from Frame.io. And I can see, can you make it look like it was shot in slow motion? We even see the annotation. So from there, you think, okay, well, let's open up Frame.io in Safari and write back. But no, we can do this from inside of Resolve because it did say complete integration. So if we double-click on this marker, similar to a collaboration chat, I can now speak with my producer, and I can say, sure thing, we're on it. Let's go ahead and send that out. Let's open Safari back up. And, whoop, there we go. And the comment's there that we just made. So now we have conversations back and forth between our producers. And by the way, this will work on a cell phone also, because you have the Frame.io app on a phone too. So we can chat with our producers on the phone or on the web between DaVinci Resolve and Frame.io on the web. So complete integration, and we're pretty excited about that. So let's go ahead and actually do the job that our producer asked us to. It definitely wasn't me, it was our producer. So let's go ahead and play this clip back. I'm going to use, again, some of the existing tools in DaVinci Resolve, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit Option// to play this back on a loop. Now, if we wanted to go ahead and artificially create frames that weren't there, we would use a tool that we've had in Resolve for a couple years now that people like a lot called optical flow. So if I get rid of stabilization, if I go to retiming and scaling, I'll go down to the retime process, and I'll go ahead and choose optical flow. Now, let's go ahead and play this back on a loop. And what we're going to see, and we'll go ahead and make this full screen, play this back on a loop. What you're going to see is Resolve does a pretty good job. But if you take a look at the legs and the dugout, we have a lot of rubbery video happening here. Now, this might work on a really fast clip, but with a clip like this, you really wouldn't get away with this. So using the new Resolve Neural Engine, we've implemented a brand new tool called Speed Warp that I want to show you. And what Speed Warp does is it intelligently takes a look at the video frames and the pixels that were warped from an optical flow, and it just corrects those and puts everything back where it should be. So let's go ahead and take a look at this timeline right here. And let's go ahead and we have the timeline playing back on a loop. Let's play back the original clip, and then we have the optical flow. And we're just going to let this play back once so it can cache. Try it again. And just like that, if we go full screen here, there's the optical flow. And here's Speed Warp. Yeah. All by 3. Yeah, no, so you can barely see any warping happening around the legs at all, and it's totally clear around the dugout. And Speed Warp's available now for everyone in the edit page. So let's go ahead and talk about something else that's pretty awesome about Resolve 16. Now, again, for the colorists in the room, or more importantly, not more importantly, a lot of editors also are doing a little bit of color correction now. And one thing that a lot of colorists take advantage of in DaVinci Resolve are timeline grades. We've had them in there for a long time. For instance, if I wanted my entire timeline to be black and white, I'll go to my timeline grade, and I'll go ahead and lower all the saturation down to 0, and now, wouldn't you know it, all of the clips in my timeline are in black and white. But sometimes those simple adjustments that we make in a timeline grade kind of backfire on us. How many of you guys have been in a situation where the timeline grade works on every clip except for just 2 clips, right? So let's go ahead and let's go to our OpenFX tool, and I'm going to go ahead and find some film grain. I'm just going to go ahead and apply film grain on a timeline. This is something we do a lot in Resolve. So we have our film grain, everything's playing back nice, we send it back to our feedback from our client, and our client says, I love the film grain on the video, but I don't love it over the titles. I want my titles to be super crisp and sharp. I only want the video to have that analog grainy kind of feel to it. So now a tool that was a 5-second timeline grade turns into, well, now let's take a node with film grain and put it on every single clip except for the titles. And that's kind of a big waste of time. So let's go to the timeline grade, and get rid of that because that didn't work. Let's go back to our clip grades and hop back over to the edit page. We have this great new tool in Resolve called adjustment clips. And what adjustment clips are able to do is they can hold a color grade, they can hold a fusion effect, they can hold a cropping instruction, they can hold anything, any kind of effect in Resolve for as little or as much time as we want it to. So for instance, I have an adjustment clip hovering over the whole timeline. Let's go to OFX in the edit page now. Let's go ahead and find our film grain here, apply it on our adjustment clip, and now we have, similar to a timeline grade, film grain over everything. But if I use the existing advanced editorial tools in Resolve and I go ahead and I highlight all of my text tools right here, I can hit Option up to punch holes in the adjustment clip, and then I'll hit Option down to remove those holes and move the text back to where it belongs. And just like that, I now have film grain over every single clip in the project except for my titles. So adjustment clips are very malleable, they're very bendable, and essentially you can put any kind of effect on an adjustment clip to affect your timeline. So again, if I wanted this section right here to be just a little bit zoomed in with these two shots sharing the zoom compared to the rest of the timeline, I can do that. Now, speaking of adjustment clips, we have even more tools to talk about when it comes to new OFX tools in Resolve 16, which we'll get into in the color page in a little bit. But also, I want to talk about keyframing. Now, a lot of folks have been asking us for a long time to be able to keyframe the OFX tools in the traditional keyframe editor in the color page and in the curve editor in the edit page. And we went ahead and did it. So if I go ahead and open my curve editor on the edit page, and if I choose what curve I want to edit, if I hit this drop-down menu right here, as you can see, if I look at film grain, I have every single parameter of my film grain that could be keyframed or edited, and I can edit it as a curve. Well, let's go ahead and hit opacity. I can edit it as a curve. So I can go in here, and I can simply zoom in, and let's make some keyframes. Option click, option click, option click, option click. And now I can go ahead and keyframe the opacity of my film grain right from the edit page with a curve editor, just like that. So not only are OFX tools now keyframeable from the curve editor on the edit page, but if we go to the color page and I apply a OFX, let's just do a lens blur right here. If we go down to corrector 1 and we zoom in, you can see the lens blur available under corrector 1 in the traditional keyframe editor. So we now have that in Resolve 16. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the new tools going on with Fusion this year in Resolve. Now what's new in version 16 versus version 15? It works a lot faster. So when we implemented Fusion inside of DaVinci Resolve last year in version 15, we had a software app that was traditionally very CPU heavy going into Resolve, which we all know is very GPU heavy, and we had some clashing heads going on there. Even really fast machines, when playing Fusion inside of Resolve, were getting 2 to 3 frames per second of playback when it should have been playing back in real time. Well, given the appropriate amount of time, having Fusion work much better in Resolve, and also moving the Fusion engine from CPU over to primarily GPU-based, what we have is way faster performances of our Fusion comps inside of Resolve. And for the folks that want to know about standalone Fusion, at NAB this year we came out with Fusion 16 Studio standalone. So we went from 9 to 16 in one night. It was a pretty big night for us. But essentially what Fusion 16 is now is the Fusion inside of Resolve taken out into its own separate app with a few extra little things that the Fusion artists need. So with Fusion running in Resolve now, even if I go ahead and I zoom in, if I take this 3D comp and I throw it over some video, it's going to go ahead and it's going to have a really easy time playing back. And these are things that would have 2 to 3 frames per second of playback last year. Now if I take this 3D comp and I go ahead and I open up in the Fusion page, I can still see this comp as a Fusion comp. I can right click on it, I can expand it, And then what I can do is take my 3D merge and throw it into viewer number 1, for instance. And we're in an authentic 3D compositing environment right now. So everything that you'd normally do with a 3D motion graphic I can do here in Fusion. I can even do things like, let's zoom in here and get a better view of the text. I can go to my text tool right here, open it up in the inspector. I can do things like change the extrusion depth. I can manipulate the bevel depth and the bevel width. So we do have a lot of new tools here for the colorists. And one of the things, no matter how much we expand Resolve and how many new features we add or how many new tools we add, everything from the cut page to the new stuff in Fairlight to adjustment clips and everything like that, we've still added a ton of stuff for the colorists over here in Resolve 16. Now the first thing I want to talk to you guys about are the brand new improved scopes. So these are essentially the scopes that we had last year. I'm going to go ahead and pop them out. I'm going to go ahead and get to a single view of my scopes. And we have the classic RGB parade. You know, timeless, some would say, right? It shows you your levels, gets the job done, shows you your scopes. Now, these scopes last year were all built off of a CPU protocol. And what we did is we moved the scopes entirely from the CPU over to the GPU. So now we have a really excellent low-pass filter. So I'm going to go ahead and activate the low-pass filter. You can see how much clearer the scopes are. Not only that, we now have qualities between low, medium, and high. So I'm going to go ahead and go to high quality. And if we go ahead and zoom into those scopes, look at all that fine detail. They're way less dense. They're way fluffier. It's a lot easier for us to see much more subtle information than we've ever had before. Now, the RGB parade and every other scope has its own independent upgrades. If we go ahead and open our options here, I can now view YRGB, so I can see a completely separate luminance channel if I want to. I can activate extents, and for the folks working in HDR with specular highlights, it's a lot more information than we've ever seen in the scopes before. And let's go ahead and go over to our good friend, the vector scope. So if we go ahead and open up our options for the vector scope, one thing that we're going to notice is that we now actually have colorized vector scope. So if your clip is moving towards red or moving towards yellow, we're actually going to see hints of red and yellow kind of subtly faded into the image, or faded into the scope, pardon me. We have extents and combines in the vector scope. The 2x zoom is way more articulate than it was last year. And we can also isolate the low range or the mid range or the high range of our shot right there in the vector scopes. We still have our skin tone indicator, obviously, but the biggest advancement in the scopes, and my new personal favorite thing about the scopes in Resolve, is the new CIE 1931 scope. So we now have these scopes built into Resolve natively, and for those of you that haven't seen this scope before, essentially what we're looking at here, this horseshoe shape, is essentially the color spectrum that we humans can see with our eyes. I'm assuming everyone in the room is human? Good, cool. Awesome. So this is actually, this triangular shape is the color space of our timeline that we're currently working in. Of course, we're in Rec 709 right now. But the way to actually think of this triangle is actually a three-dimensional top-down view of a pyramid. Because that's what we're really looking at now. We're looking at a 3D color space. And I can see what colors are currently active within my shot. Now, if I go over to saturation, for instance, and I go ahead and raise it all the way up, not only does the shot look ridiculous, but as you can see, if we zoom into our scopes right here, we can see all of this density wrapped up against the wall. Now, all of us know that's not good. That's not broadcast legal. It's not going to pass a QC check. We have to go ahead and tone that down. So using the CIE scope in conjunction with something like your vector scopes are going to do a great job at helping you dictate where you want to place your saturation, where you want to place your hues, to push the saturation, but again, not too far. So those are CIE scopes. All of these are available in Resolve now. And if you want the classic scopes, of course, you can turn off the low-pass filter and you can get back to the scopes you had last year if you like. But we're all pretty excited about those. You all also might have noticed that we have a little bit of a change to the curve tool this year. We have some scopes hanging out inside of the curves. So what we can do with these histograms inside of the curves is we can choose to, first of all, turn them off if you don't want to see them, or we can have the histograms follow the input of the clip or the output after the color correction, which means if I go ahead and add a new node to this shot and I go ahead and adjust my curves or any color correction, I can see my histograms move as I'm adjusting my curves. Even better yet, if I want to isolate and ungang my curves, let's say if I want to focus on my blue channel, I can go ahead and ungang them, click on blue, and now everything goes transparent except for blue. I can zoom in here, and I can specifically focus on just my blue channel for my shot. So histograms inside of the curves are going to be a really great way for you to have a closer relationship with how your curves are affecting the color for your shot. Now, let's go ahead and talk about a 4-letter word in the colorist community, and that's auto color and shot match to this clip. So we've had these tools in Resolve for a while now, and sometimes they get a bad rep, but at the end of the day, what auto color can do is just get you to a simple starting point before you begin your color correction. And utilizing the new Resolve Neural Engine, auto color and shot match to this clip have been completely rewritten from scratch to do some really cool stuff. So I want to go ahead and I'm going to hit Command Y to make a new version of this clip, right? I want to keep the original color grade we have, but we're going to go ahead and do some stuff to it right now. So let's go ahead and right click and, whoa, pardon me, watch yourself, microphone. Let's wipe out this color grade. So what I'm going to do is go down here and hit the auto color button. There we go. And the first thing you're going to notice, let's hop back to our scopes right here. Let's pop out the RGB parade, and let's go ahead and hit Shift F to get a larger view of this. Now what we're going to notice about this clip is that it's nice and saturated, it's vibrant, the highlights peaked out just around at the very, very tippy top of the shot. The shadows went right down to the bottom, but most importantly, what you're going to notice in this high contrast shot is that there's not too much density in the shadows. There's a lot of information here inside of the shot for us to work with. So the new auto color is a lot more advanced than the predecessor that we had last year. Now let's go ahead and talk about shot match to this clip. If we go to, let's say, this shot over here, this shot, in my opinion, has a pretty good vibe of what our whole timeline's looking like. I think the shot pretty well represents the look of the trailer. So I want to go ahead and I want to have this shot match the look of this shot. So what we're going to do is click on the shot that we want to color correct. Then let's scroll down here. I want to go ahead and Command click on the shot we want to shot match to. And then I'm going to go ahead and right click and select shot match to this clip. And that's what Resolve does for us automatically. Now if I add one more node on the end of that and I do a simple 10-second correction, and I just go ahead and just take the black levels down a little bit, maybe desaturate a tad, and then go over to my tint and just make the tint a little bit greener. Shot match to this clip plus a very, very simple, very fast primary color correction got us right here. Now we still have version 1 of this shot hiding in the backgrounds. So if I go ahead and hit Command B, we can swap between versions. So that's what we had originally, with a 5-node structure including a qualifier for the highlights and a lot of other advanced color corrections. And that's what shot match to this clip plus a very, very quick color correction did. It's pretty close. So again, how many of you folks have ever been in a situation where your client gives you a note that you really don't agree with, you know it doesn't make a lot of sense, but they're the client, so you're going to have to go through and give them that note. What you can do now is you could go ahead and color 5 or 6 clips properly, and then go ahead and shot match to this clip a bunch of other clips. Send that out and say, is this the kind of look that you want to go for? Do you want to continue with this, or should we go back to what we had before? So shot match to this clip, think of it as a great time-saving tool for colorists to make fast looks copied across lots of different shots. So something else I want to talk to you guys about are some of the new OFX tools inside of DaVinci Resolve. Let's start with a fan favorite that's very beloved by a lot of colorists. Let's talk about face refinement. Now, how many of you guys have seen this tool before in previous years? Cool. So it got a big, big upgrade this year. If you go to OFX, and there's a lot of people that haven't seen it before, so it's still very exciting. And if I go down and I go ahead and search for face refinement, I'm going to go ahead and highlight and apply face refinement onto node number 7. Now I'm just going to go ahead and click Analyze. And you'll notice it's a lot faster than last year also, again, due to the neural engine. So I can take this overlay off. The first thing I actually want to do on node number 1, I just want to go ahead and make this clip a little bit brighter so we have more contrast to work with. So let's go ahead and take that down right there and make his face a little bit brighter. There we go. So if we go over to node number 7 right here, to the face refinement, you'll now notice that the controls are looking a little different. Let's click Shift F to get to our OFX editing view. Now, you'll notice that with the skin mask and with the texture, I have new Beauty Automatic tools. So similar to the FX Beauty tool we introduced in 15.2, I have the ability to adjust the scale and amount of an automatic beauty enhancer. Additionally, we also have smoothing. So I can not only add or take away smoothing, but I can add detail size and the amount of detail itself. So I have access to extremely subtle controls over the smoothness of his face. And again, these aren't clown car tools, because if it's going inside of Resolve, it has to have the same exact amount of subtlety that you'd expect from any kind of color tool in the software. So what I can also do is I can go ahead and brighten his eyes. We can add a little bit of an eye light. I can add eye light removal, eye bag removal. And then we can also go to lip, blush, cheek, and chin. So we can go ahead and add more saturation to his cheeks, add more saturation to his lips. So it's a really great tool for the automatic power window that you would have made, or pardon me, you would have made several power windows over the character's face. Face refinement now does that for you, and using the new neural engine and utilizing new tools that you find on the beauty tool in DaVinci Resolve, it's a lot faster and more efficient. So let's talk about another new tool that we have in the software. Let's go ahead and talk about, chromatic adaptation. So let's go ahead and make a new node and open up the OFX tab. And chromatic adaptation is essentially one of the most advanced color temperature tools that you've ever seen to get a shot from one color temperature to the other. Now, this will work in multiple formats. You can actually use standard illuminance to get from D60 to D65 with one click, or you can also use color temperatures, and I can very easily adjust the input and the output color temperature of the shot. You notice how well this is treating the shadows and how well it's treating the highlights. It's a really, really complex color temperature tool. Now, going back to some of the other awesome OFX tools we have in Resolve 16, last year we went ahead and we brought back a lot of the DaVinci Revival tools, and a big popular one that we had last year was film damage in addition to film grain. So we wanted to take that a step further after all the feature requests we got, and we have this really great new OFX tool called Analog Damage. Now, for anyone here that works with archival footage or needs to make something look like archival footage, we have all these presets set from early television to 1960s color, 1980s. Then you notice when everything went digital in the 90s. But again, we have clean and old VHS. But again, the cool thing about this is that if you go down to the actual VHS controls, you can actually adjust the restless foot offset, adjust the scan lines, the broadcast signal, all of that jazz. It's all right here in Analog Damage. So this is a really great tool for very quickly dumbing down your footage the way it needs to be dumbed down to make it look like any kind of archival footage out there. Some of the other really great new OFX tools, let's take a look here. We also have, instead of chromatic adaptation, we have chromatic aberration, which is going to go ahead and remove chrominance shifts and remove aberrations from shots in your timeline. But my personal favorite tool in terms of new OFX tools is the new object removal tool. So if we go ahead and take a look at this clip right here, let's go ahead and play it back. And we have a second baseman right here, and he's going to go ahead and he's going to move past across the shot. Now, what if the producer doesn't want him in the shot because it distracts from the ball flying through the shot? Well, using this tool, the first thing we did is we went ahead and we rotoscoped our baseball player. And pretty easily, we just did a custom power window, and we rotoscoped it around him. And then, before I actually turn on the tool, I want to go ahead and show you the mask overlay. Because what Resolve is actually doing here is it's combining our existing noise reduction tools with the new DaVinci Resolve Neural Engine. Now, about our noise reduction, you guys know that we have temporal and spatial noise reduction. Temporal looks at the same pixel in terms of time, backwards and forwards, in a certain number of frames. And then spatial noise reduction looks at noise around each and every pixel, swallowing up the bad pixels and putting in better pixels. So we're using those existing powerful noise reduction tools in addition to the new DaVinci Resolve Neural Engine to do things like make second baseman disappear. So we're going to go back. We're going to let that cache once before it starts playing back in real time. And again, this isn't necessarily the easiest shot to object remove. We have a shaky handheld camera shot. We have a tree line of woods in the background. And we have a baseball flying through the shot. And again, this is kind of the first version, the first iteration of this tool inside of DaVinci Resolve 16. But as you can see, it does a really, really good job. More than enough to pass for any kind of object removal you'd need. And that's over there in the new OFX tools underneath as object removal. Now, one other really cool thing in the color page that I want to show you guys is the ability to copy and paste attributes on the color page. We've wanted to do this for a long time now, and we finally got around to it. So if I want to go ahead and take, let's say, this shot over here, and I want to go ahead and color balance it, because if I look at the shot, I can obviously see it's a very, very warm shot. Look at where my red channel is cresting versus where my green and my blue shots are. My green and blue channels, pardon me. It's a warm shot. So let's go over and use a tool, our RGB mixer, and let's go ahead and add a little bit to the blue channel, and then take away a little bit from the red channel to go ahead and balance that shot out a little bit better. And then we'll go ahead and mess with the green output to get to the tint that we want. So if we did that to rebalance our shot, and then we'll go ahead to our primary tools, we'll make it a little bit brighter too. Let's increase the gain, and let's go ahead and move the gamma up as well, and then the lift additionally down there too. So that's our new color correction. We have some primary color correction, and we have an RGB mixer correction. Now if I want to go ahead and copy that node, I want to paste it over to, let's say, this shot right here. I'll go ahead and I'll make a new node. Pardon me. Make a new node. And then instead of just hitting paste, what I'm going to do is go to Edit, Paste Attributes. And just like the tools that editors have been able to take advantage of for years and years and years now, colorists now have the ability to take advantage of these controls too. I can go ahead and I can choose to copy over all of my power windows, my qualifier, my noise reduction, all of my color corrections, or just the RGB mixer. And we go ahead and apply that. As you can see, the RGB mixer went through, the primary correction did not. So we can now copy and paste attributes between nodes on the color page in Resolve 16. Yeah. So those are just a few of the new tools we have here in Resolve 16. But between the infrastructural updates between across all of the pages, like having multiple timeline resolutions and frame rates in the same project, the frame IO integration, the new tools on the edit page, adjustment clips, the brand new scopes on the color page, which is a huge improvement. There's a ton of tools here for every single user inside of DaVinci Resolve. And again, I hope you guys can see the idea of being inside of Resolve is having the best of every single world at your fingertips at one time in one app. Every time we change pages here, everything about the software completely switches over from the user interface, the infrastructure, the tool set, the culture of the whole software changes based on what page you're in to adapt to what the highest level person in that job would want to work in. And it's all in one app. So that's what's new in DaVinci Resolve 16. You can download beta number 3 from our website. It just came out yesterday. It's available at blackmagicdesign.com. And again, thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate it.